So before we look at the screens due for today, which are 9 through 11, let's revisit the previous screens and talk a little bit about the different sequences. So when we did the arithmetic sequences, which was screens 1 and 2, one thing we talked about is that the points, although we don't connect them, show a linear pattern. So if I was to connect them, a line would go through them. The reason we don't connect the points is because we're listing numbers starting at 0 and we're counting off by 1, so there is no 2.5 answer or 4.2 answer. We just have these 6 answers and that's it. In screen 2, we have, again, another linear pattern. So one of the things we're going to be talking about today, as we look at arithmetic sequences and geometric sequences, and now the third sequence, which is called a shifted geometric sequence, is that they all take on patterns in terms of their graphical shape. And arithmetic sequences, such as the first problem and this one here, they all take on a linear pattern. And the main reason why is because we continue to add the same number over and over again. So as I move over 1, every time I move over 1 or increase x by 1, the answer is always going down -5, or we're always adding -5. And that's going to create a linear pattern because the points are being equally spaced as x increases by 1. Geometric sequences, which was the third and fourth screen. This time we're starting at 1 and we're multiplying by 2, so all the numbers are doubling. And this time the distance between the numbers is changing. So as x increases by 1, the difference here is 1, but the difference between 2 and 4 is 2. The difference between 16 and 32 is 16. So that since the differences are different, we're getting a shape that is nonlinear. So I'm going to call these linear or nonlinear graphical shapes. And so it's going to be curved. Now the graph itself, although it stops here at 0, 1, the graph itself actually approaches, it gets really close to the x-axis. I'm sorry, the x-axis, yes. So for example, if I would continue going in this direction, if I would actually went below 0 as an x value, I'm basically taking half of the previous answer to get to the next one. So as I move up from 16 up, half of 16 is 8, half of 8 is 4, half of 4 is 2, and so on. Well, half of 1 is a half of a half is a fourth, half of a fourth is an eighth. And if I keep doing that, I'm going to keep getting closer and closer to the x-axis, but I'll never get to 0. And that's also true for this one here. This one is actually coming down. And as I look at the answers, they're getting smaller and smaller. But if I keep taking a third of the last answer to get to the next answer, I'm going to get a fraction that's smaller and smaller, but I'm never going to get to 0. So this graph is curved. It's non-linear, and it is approaching the x-axis again. So I need you to understand that arithmetics are always linear. They look like a line. Geometrics are always non-linear. They're curved. They're approaching 0, but they'll never get there. In terms of the problems due for today, you were asked to complete problems 9 through 11, and we actually completed 2 of those in class. So we're going to take a look at the rest of the answers and then discuss problems 10, 11, and then we'll finish off the activity. So in this problem, I went ahead and got started in terms of the calculations. So as we talked about 2 days ago, to be able to get to the first answer, or U1 answer, we have to take the initial answer 450 and multiply by 0.85, because we're losing 15% of the chlorines burning off, which means 85% of it is still there. And then we add 45 more grams, because that's the amount that is being added every day at the same time. So in this case here, based on the table at 8 o'clock p.m. So if I take the 427.5 answer, do the same thing, multiply by 0.85, then add the 45. I'm going to get an answer of approximately 408.375. And then if I continue the same thing by taking the previous answer, multiply by 0.85, and then add 45 to get the next answer, so we're looking at 392.11875. And then for day 4, we'll be at like 378.3001. We'll go ahead and start rounding. So rounding the thousands is usually a pretty good choice. Oops. So I'll take my answer, multiply by 0.85, and then add 45. My next answer, so we're at 366.556. So I'm going to stop here in terms of answers. Hopefully you have, we talked about before, hopefully you have all thumbs up all the way down. What I really want to emphasize is the fact that the answer from 0 to 1 had a difference of about 33, with the difference between 1 and 2 is about 19, and then here the difference is about 16, and then here the difference is about 14, and now we're looking at a difference of about 12. So as I go on from one day to the next day, it's still the answers are decreasing, but the difference between the answers is different, and it's actually getting closer and closer to 0 of a difference. So again, this particular graph will be a non-linear graph, which we'll see here in a moment when we start putting it in the numbers. And the other thing is that it actually is approaching a certain number. That was question number 11. What number do you think it's approaching? And again, you may not have the right answer for the first time. We're going to actually talk today about how to actually figure out that answer. So this will be one of the problems we're going to talk about. But I need you to understand that the graph, again, is not linear. It is approaching a certain number, but it's not, generally it's not approaching 0. It's just, and the last thing is that this sequence is called shifted geometric. So it has the multiplication, but it also has addition piece. So we have addition only is the arithmetic, multiplication only is the geometric, and shifted geometric has multiplication and addition. So next page is asking you to graph those points. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the answers, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the graph. So if you look at the completed table, ended up with 348.087 at day 7. The graph is curved, and if you look at the distance between the points, they're getting closer and closer together. And the questions are going to be asked on the next screen is, where do you think this graph is going to level off at? Because eventually these distances are going to get so close together that the points are basically going to be on top of each other as you move from left to right. So it is a guess. So that's what you're asked to do here. So I'll leave that as a your answer, because we're going to come back and revisit this problem during class today and actually determine what the answer would be. So for the last two problems, they're asking you to create the shifted geometric sequence. And so what you need to understand about shifted is that there are two steps. There's going to be a multiplication step, and there's going to be an addition step. And the addition can be an addition of a positive number or an addition of a negative number. So if you would go ahead and determine the answers for this table, and again, turn the video back on when you're ready to continue. So it tells us we're starting at 0. It says the two steps are going to multiply our answer by 2 and then add -5 to it. So 0 times 2 minus 0 plus the negative 5, which gives me a negative 5 answer. So that will be the answer for the u of 1. And then we're supposed to multiply by 2 and then add negative 5. So 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. And then the negative 5 makes negative 15. And then multiply by 2, which is negative 30. And then negative 5 makes negative 35. And then negative 70 when I multiply by 2. And then I'm going to add negative 5, so negative 75. And then for the last one, multiply by 2, which is negative 150. And then the negative 5. So if I kind of zoom in, so graph looks like this. You'll notice that this particular one here, the points are getting further apart instead of closer apart. So in this particular sequence, because the answers are getting further and further apart, that means this graph is just going to continue to get larger and larger and larger. So as x increases, this graph is just going to continue to go down faster and faster. So there's not going to be a place where it's going to level off. Like as in the previous problem, the points got closer, so that means it is approaching a number. Here they're getting further and further apart, which means the graph, as x gets larger, is not approaching a number. It's just going to get extremely small. So we'll get eventually into negative 1 millions, negative 1 billions eventually, and so on. In the next problem, if you go ahead and follow the steps and create the table, take a look at it. Does it appear that it's approaching a number? Look at the distance between the points, or are they getting closer together, which means it is leveling off to a certain number, or are they getting further apart? And if that's the case, that means that it's just going to get either extremely large or extremely small, depending if the answers are getting more negative or more positive. So turn the video back on when you have the table completed. So here we're beginning at 4. We're going to multiply it by 3, which is 12. Take away 7, gives me 5. And then we'll multiply 3 with 17, or sorry, 15. Take away 7, to 8. And then here we're going to multiply by 3, which is 24. Take away 7 gives me 17. Multiply by 3 is 51. Take away 7 is 44. And the last one, multiply by 3, which is 132. And take away 7 is 125. So again, it's curved, but you'll notice that the points are getting further and further apart, which means this graph is going to continue to get extremely large, or continue to get very high. So it's not going to level off because the points are getting further and further apart. But the sequence is still geometric, and it does require 2 steps. It has a multiplication step and it has an addition step.